how we can learn to thrive through life's detours. I know that everyone loves a detour sign. Everyone loves driving down a road that you've got mapped out in your head. You drive it every day, and you see that road closures coming soon, right? And you just know that this is going to just cause all kinds of unnecessary extra in your life. And sooner or later, they're going to put that road closed sign up there. And you see those orange signs that say detour. And you've got to go in a different direction. Actually, on our way home, typically, when we leave from here, because we're on this side of Clinton, we take Boykin Bridge Road. We go Indian Town all the way to Boykin Bridge, what turns into Boykin Bridge. It's closed until the first of the year. And I think last Wednesday, or maybe it was Sunday, I said, I can't wait for this road to open back up. Just so I can save my 1 or 2 minutes that it's quicker than going the longer way through Walmart and hitting all the stop signs. But in life, just in our everyday, we have detours that we kind of walk through. We have detours, areas of our lives that we didn't plan on going, but God knew that we needed to get out of what we planned and get into where He needs us to be, because He's got something better in our detour than we could ever have if we just went on our way by ourselves. And I want to talk about one of the greatest detours in the New Testament. And if you've got your Bible, turn to the book of Acts, chapter 27. Acts 27, and we're going to go ahead and start reading in verse 1. Over the next few weeks, I just want to go just from the 27th chapter and the first 10 of 28. I'm not going to try to get through all that tonight. But I do feel like, that this is something that we can learn, because when you are faced with another detour, you can choose to thrive in it or worry about it. Now, I'll tell you what I picked 9 out of 10 times. I worry. You didn't have to call me out that quick. I'm just saying. But you are right, 100%. I'm a warrior. Not a horror warrior, I'm a warrior. When I see problems, when I have a detour, when I see issues in my life, my brain works overtime trying to figure out how to fix a problem. And my wife is standing there going, some problems you don't have to fix. Some problems are there so you can rely on God, so in His times He can fix. And I'll go, I know that's right, but I don't want to wait. I want to fix it myself. And I twist myself in knots trying to fix something and finally come to the conclusion, I can't do it. And then God's, all right, now it's my turn. And He fixes it. And I was like, yeah. But we have a choice every time we face an obstacle. Every time we face an issue. Do we thrive through it or worry through it? Either way, you're getting through it. But do you get it with peace or with stress? So I want to help me, and you can learn from me as I'm preaching to myself how to thrive through life's detours. Acts chapter 27, starting in verse 1. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Now, let's get some background. For those that might not know, the book of Acts is the really birthplace of the church. The first few chapters is Jesus coming in. It's a retelling. Luke is writing a historical account to Theophilus. This is the Roman gentleman. And he's writing a historical account, and he kind of redoes his exit out of the book of Luke. He talks about Jesus giving the Great Commission again. He talks about Jesus ascending into heaven. And then he gets into the next steps of the local church of Jerusalem. They go to the upper room. They pray for a few days. 125 are people in there, from 500 to 125. Jesus showed Himself after His death, burial, and resurrection to 500 people. Only 120 decided to stay in the upper room. They prayed, the Holy Spirit fell, Peter came out and started preaching the gospel. 3,000 people got saved. And then every time they turn around, Peter or Philip or somebody is healing somebody, preaching to something, and the church is growing and growing. And then we're introduced to a man named Stephen. Stephen is one of the first deacons, and he is serving and helping, and he's talking about the gospel, and the Jewish leaders see Stephen and hear what he's talking about, get really mad at Stephen and said, fine, you're going to do this, we're going to silence you. And they take Stephen out. They run through trials just like they did with Jesus. They lied on Stephen, said that he was saying things that he wasn't. Ends up, they stoned Jesus to death. But on the way, they took their cloaks off so they can get that good baseball throw in what they're doing. And they hand their cloaks to a young Pharisee by the name of Saul. Saul, seeing the death of Stephen and endorsing it, condoning it, says, that's a really good idea. Goes to the high priest and says, look, I want your permission to go to Damascus, and I'm going to round up the Christians there, bring them back here, and we can do this again. He gets the papers and he gets on the road to Damascus. And on his way to Damascus, he encounters Jesus. Jesus asks him, why is he persecuting him? And has a conversation with Jesus. Paul becomes blind from this encounter, says, you got to go into Damascus. There's a prophet in there. He's going to come pray for you. And then he's going to tell you all that you're going to have to suffer. And that happens. Ananias comes and takes and prays over Paul. What's like fish scales fell off his eyes. Paul goes back to Jerusalem and tries to present himself to the deacons and the leaders of the Christian church. They're kind of like, I don't know if we're going to take this guy. And then you get introduced to a guy named Barnabas. Barnabas kind of comes up there. Y'all didn't know you're going to get the whole 26 chapters we didn't cover. Barnabas says, look, I was there when he was preaching in Damascus. I think he's telling the truth. So he's in Jerusalem and he's walking with all the apostles and the disciples and everything. And then the church begins to grow. And then Barnabas gets sent out. Actually, Paul ends up getting in a little bit of hot water with some of the leadership. And he goes back to home. He goes back to Tarsus and Crete and all that area. Barnabas gets sent to Asia Minor in the city of Antioch to start a church. He's there for a little bit of time. Then he goes and gets Paul, brings Paul to Antioch, and they start preaching. Then they start going on missionary journeys. Paul then does 3 rounds of missionary journeys in Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Asia Minor and all these things. And then comes back to Jerusalem with the understanding, because a prophet told him that if you go back to Jerusalem, you're going to be bound and you're going to be arrested. And Paul's like, let's do it. And he goes back to Jerusalem. Sure enough, he gets put. The Pharisees and the Sadducees start having an argument over Paul. They go and start beating Paul until Roman soldiers came to try to break up a riot. They stopped when they saw the police. And they said, this man's causing riots, lying in on Paul. They arrest Paul. They take Paul, about to flog him, to beat him mercilessly. I don't know. They were going to beat him up. Until Paul says, I'm a Roman citizen. I am a Roman. Now, not everybody in Israel were Roman citizens. They were under the empire of Rome. They were not Roman. But because he was born in Tarsus, in the Isle of Crete, he was a Roman citizen by birth, which gave him certain rights that Jewish people didn't have at that time, even though he was a Jew. And they present him, instead of flogging him, they had to present him in front of the governor. Governor Felix didn't really like his story, was going to sell him off, but Governor Felix gets replaced by Festus. Festus says, look, if you want to go to Caesar, because that's what Paul said, go to Caesar. And he sent him off. In the middle of this, we have Luke, who is writing the book of Acts, change. I think it's chapter 16, changes from they and them to we and us, which indicates Luke's on this journey too. He stopped writing a history. Now he's writing a memoir. And we get to Paul being arrested, and they're about to send him to Rome to stand before Caesar. And when they finally decided to take him to Italy, is where we're at now. Verse 2. And they embarked in a ship to Anadronum, which was about to sail to the port along the coast of Asia. We put out to sea, accompanied by Artisicus, the Macedonian and from Thessalonica. The next day we put into Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and, to be cared for. So every time they stopped, if Paul knew somebody, he says, go ahead, just make sure you come back. He wasn't worried about Paul running off. Paul's already stated, I'm not afraid to die. I know that I'm supposed to go to Caesar. So, Julius is like, yeah, we know you're coming. Just make sure you make it on time. All right? So he goes off to his friends to be cared for. And putting out to sea, there we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, or the island of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. And when we sailed across the open sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days, and arriving with difficulty off of Cnidus. And as the wind did not allow us to go further, we sailed under the lee of Crete, or the island of Crete, off of Salmon. Coasting along with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Laodicea. So we see how Paul is taking small little boat trips to get to somewhere to take the bigger trip. He's basically, if it was off of the coast of North Carolina, he would sail from Wilmington and get to the Outer Banks. And from the Outer Banks, he might get to the Virginia beaches and stuff like that. He's just kind of doing puddle jumps. He's not going far, because you're not going to go on the Mediterranean Sea, especially in this time of the year, on a small boat. You're looking for something big. So eventually, they find a ship of Alexandria. So it's a big ship, and they said, we're going to put you on this ship. It's going to Italy. From Italy, you'll go into Rome, and from Rome, you can stand before Caesar and get the trial you deserve. But even that ship is having a hard time, because the winds are against them, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But can I tell you, there are times that your journey has a bunch of little stops before you can get to where you're going. And Lord knows, I get so frustrated when I have a bunch of little stops to do before I can get on somewhere. Sometimes the most stressed I get is right before a vacation, and I know we're about to head out, and I'm one about time. My wife could care less about time, and I say that with so much love, because she'll be late anywhere and everywhere, and it eats my nerves up. We compromise by me whining, I want to get there early. So I don't lie to her, because she knows I do this. But if she'll ask me, what time do we leave by? I give 15 extra minutes. Not that we need it in traffic, but we need it to get out the house. But if I know that there's time that we're going to head out, we're going to go on a trip, or we're going to go somewhere, but if I've got 3 or 4 stops that I've got to make before we can actually go, I get anxious just because I'm ready to stop. I don't want to go to Walmart, and I don't want to go to the gas station. I don't want to go to Food Line. I don't want to go wherever I go. I'm just ready to go on vacation, or I'm ready to go somewhere. And it gets so frustrating, all these little stops that we have to make. And in life we do this. We have these goals of being financially secure. We have these goals of being used in the church or serving in the church. We have these goals of doing great things. But oftentimes there's a lot of little steps that we have to take before we can get there, and it gets frustrating. And so many people find themselves going from one stop to the next, and they get discouraged and give up because they don't feel like they're making progress. How Paul must have felt knowing that he was going to stand before Caesar, and he kept on having to stop. And kept on having to stop. Now he finally gets to the boat. This boat's going to take me to Italy. But the winds don't agree. And they keep having to sail in the wrong direction, because the wind won't let them go directly. They've got to keep going kind of like this southern belle kind of deal. Or are they going around these islands instead of going directly to where he wants to go? How many of us get impatient? I told you, we all have all the spiritual fruit, but that one's the smallest one. That's like that little that messed up fruit that's kind of over there just kind of hanging dingling. That's kind of like the patience is for me. I'm trying to work on it. But patience is not easy for me. I'm the person that orders something on Amazon and then goes straight to the tracking thing and see if it's on the way. I know it's not, but I want it to be. And I'll refresh it about 500-600 times before I see it. And Lord, don't let it say it's going to be delivered and then delayed. I'm on the phone. Especially if I know it's in Roseboro. I'll go to the Roseboro post office. But we get so discouraged in life. But the reality is all these little stops had purpose. In one of the stops, he was allowed to go to friends, and they were allowed to take care of him. Sometimes those stops are for your purpose because you need to rest. There are days that all I want to do is get home so I can rest. But I think sometimes we forget how to rest. Sometimes we forget how to take a breath and not do something. When I rest, I still don't rest because I'm still constantly processing stuff. I don't know how to rest anymore. And then we get burned out. Can I tell you the hardest things to deal with in churches is burnout. Because it's hard to prevent it. Especially in smaller churches. Because we have a group of people that do several different things. So burnout's a very important thing that we need to be aware of, and we need rest. Take those opportunities, those little stops. God, as long as I'm here, let me find rest. And if I move, let me move closer, but let me find rest. If I'm going to take a step, let me take a step. But if I've got to wait, let me find rest. And then when we get on our ship and we're all excited to go, but the destination has changed, God, wherever I go, let me find your will and your way. Number one thing that we have to do to thrive in our detours is know that it's not you with the steering wheel. Paul didn't steer the boat, not any bit at all. Nor did Luke, nor did Silas, who was with him, nor did any other prisoner that was there. And not even the guy that actually had the steering wheel was really in control, because he had to go where the wind would allow him to go. We can't go always where we want to go, and know that God has the steering wheel, not just the wheel, but the wind too. And He's going to push our lives and guide our lives where He needs us to be in those moments, and set up the steps that we need to be set up on so that we can be where God needs us to be when we're needed the most. It's no surprise that you made it here to Bethany. Not just tonight, but just in general. It's no surprise to God that I've ended up back at Bethany. I can't tell you how many times Miss Sherry and Charles Ray and I have talked about me coming back, and they always meant it with a little bit of seriousness, but a little bit of levity too, because I was pastoring, and obviously they're not going to say, you quit your job and come over here. They're not going to do that, obviously, but they would say, we miss you. We'd love to have you. Come on. Don't you want to come play? Don't you want to come do this? Don't you want to come do that? And I was like, I would love to, but now fast forward a few years. And here I am. It might have surprised me, but it didn't surprise God. Can I confess something to y'all? I was nervous coming back. Because last time I was here, I was a dumb teenager. I sure didn't say that when I was then. I thought I had some answers. I was wrong. I can look back now and know that I was wrong. And you can ask Lily. We and her had conversations, and my fear was, I hope they do not judge me in my present for the things that they saw me in my past. I know I was loved. That was 100% sure. I just know that I could have done. We are our own worst critics, and I saw all the ways that I could have weren't done better, and I could have done things. I hope they see me for who I am. And Lily, not knowing not a bit of y'all, goes, they will. And she was right. But when we go through detours, again, the first thing, God has control. Stop fighting to get control of the wheel. Let God take your life where He needs it to be. Be content no matter where you go. Can I tell you, that's one of the hardest things to do as a Christian, is be content. Because we live in a world that builds a society off of jealousy and covetousness. Oh, only the best people wear these clothes, and only the best people drive this car, and only the best people have this house, and only the best people drink this water. It's water. Can I tell you, it's not what I don't have that I should focus on. But God, thank you for what I do. God, thank you for where you've placed me. God, thank you for where you're taking me. And as long as you're in control, I'm along for the ride. Amen? Because oftentimes, and there are times that I get like it, God, I'm ready to jump off the boat. I'm just tired. I don't want to get back on the boat. I can tell you how my medicine's wearing out because my ADD brain's going, pew, pew, pew. Last summer, not last summer, but the summer before last, Lily and I went to go stay with her family in Puerto Rico, and I didn't tell her this, but I wanted to find every excuse not to get on that plane and go back. Not because I don't love here. It was just beautiful there. But I was out of pocket money, and I needed to come back to work. So that was a really good excuse to get her back on that plane. But it's like finding a place and being like, I don't want to keep moving. This is fine. This is fine. But God never raised you and created you just to be fine or just to be okay. We should be thriving in ministry, thriving in service, thriving in God. And to do that, we must keep getting on the boat and going that next step. Amen? Turn to your neighbor and say, get back on the boat. Oh, come on. We could have done better than that. I know there we go. All right. I know there's not as many as on Sunday, but I can still hear you. All right. Verse 9. Verse 9. Since much time had passed and the voyage was now dangerous because even the feast was already over, Paul advised them saying, Sir, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of cargo and ship, but also our lives. I've heard this preached before as like God had given Paul a vision. Nope, that's later. What Luke writes is this. It's now in a season where many people didn't go into the ocean. We're in a transition from fall to winter. And in that area, when you transition from that warm air to that cold air, you produce a lot of storms, a lot of nor'easters, a lot of things that do not bode well for taking a trip over open ocean or open sea, over the Mediterranean Sea. And Paul says, I perceive it. I see the signs that things are going to get rough if we go out there. Can I tell you, the second thing to learn how to thrive in detours is look for what's coming at you before it gets to you. That way you can prepare before you get there. Because what happens is sometimes, let me tell you one of the things my dad would get on me for. I never went hunting a lot. But my dad did love hunting, and I remember going deer hunting, and anytime, and I still do this. If I'm walking in the woods, everybody's looking ahead. I'm not. I'm looking where? At my feet. Because I don't want to step in no briars and fall face first into whatever I'm going to catch with my face. Y'all, anybody else kind of have a hard time doing that? You walk like this most of the time. That's what it is. I'm going to make sure that I don't step in anything. And my dad would look back, you can't see where you're going. We're looking down. And I was like, yeah, but I ain't going to fall when I get there. I can go ahead and tell you that. And I'll sit there and I'll look down so I don't trip over anything. But what happens is, if I'm not careful, he'll take a turn and I'll still be going because I'm not looking where I'm going. I'm looking where I'm at. And sometimes it's even more dangerous as Christians because we're not looking where we're at. We're looking where we've been. Look what God did in my life. Look what God did at our church. Look what God did in our community. Can I tell you, the same God that did all that can do it today and will do it later. But we got to stop living in the did and start being in the do and looking for the about to. We've got to understand that we've got to perceive ahead. Call out the warning signs. When we see something wrong, hey, we should say something. I can't imagine living in North Carolina or living on the coast, the eastern coast or the western coast, and not have the modern weather that we have now, and not know whether a hurricane was going to be coming or not. There's a restaurant at Surf City, I believe it is, that Lily and I went to, and they have a bunch of pictures of what Surf City looked like throughout the years and stuff. And what was it? In the early 1900s, what was the name of that hurricane? Hazel. And it was a Category 5. It's one of the strongest hurricanes that hit North Carolina. And I was reading some of the articles, and what I was amazed is many people had no idea that it was a hurricane. It just looked stormy one day until it really started to get bad. I remember growing up with Bertha and Floyd and Fran. Bertha, Fran, and Floyd, that's the order. And I remember two things. One, we always went to my mom and papa's house because they lived on a hill. The wind wasn't as strong. They had to go up a little bit more. They don't like climbing. Two, the news was on. As long as we had power, the news was on. And when we lost power, it was on the radio because we wanted to know what was going on. I can't imagine seeing a storm cloud and have no idea the intensity of what comes. Paul says, I see the issue. I see the weather now. And if we go out now, there's going to be loss. And you would think someone would listen. But oftentimes, people don't listen. I know that you always have people listen to you. That's what I thought. It's frustrating when you have the best interest for someone and they won't listen at all. And there are times you just want to put a knot on the head. If you just listen to me. If you could just, if I could have saved you so much trouble if you would have just listened to me. Can I tell you though, as someone who is hard-headed and has a hard time listening, we need to go through some bad storms to realize how much we need to listen before we have the ability to listen. Y'all with me? Verse 11. But the centurions paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than what Paul said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority of the people decided to put out to sea from there on a chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. We're going to chance it, Paul. We're going to get there. I hear you. I just ain't going to listen to you. Again, sometimes you're not in control. I wish as a pastor and as a leader, as a minister, as a teacher, I wish I could tell the gospel and people get it and they apply it in their hearts and they build a life closer to God and they do everything right. I wish I could make them follow God with a fervor and a desire that they should have it. But I can only deliver it and model my life for it. It's always their choice. I wish I could make my son do all the best choices. And I remind him all the time, but it's still his choice. And there are times where people will not listen. There will be times where people will say, I got you, but I've got to do my own thing. And they'll go and ramp off a little bit, and they'll go and push out a little bit. But sooner or later, they'll realize two things. One, you were right, and two, I need to listen. But sometimes we need that storm. I can guarantee that if Paul ever rode with any of these centurions or this pilot again, and Paul says, I don't think we should go, I'm fairly certain they'd be like, you know what, Paul, that's a pretty good idea. Let's go ahead and just get a hotel room right here. We'll just wait it out. But they wanted to push it out. Which brings me to my next point, how to thrive through the life's detours. Don't push what God has set in motion. I'm not sure, how many of you have ever been behind a slow driver? This morning. I don't have enough road really to get behind slow drivers, and I'm typically up way before many people drive on my road. So I don't get much in slow drivers, but every once in a while we'll catch one there. And something that I've missed, because for those that don't know, when I left here, I moved to Raleigh, lived in Raleigh for a couple years, and lived in Dunn for a few years, and then in Fayetteville or around Fayetteville for a couple years. So a lot of city time, and though my family still lived in Warsaw when I would go, something I used to not having to deal with is getting behind a tractor. I moved to Roseboro, and I realized how quick we get behind tractors up in the country area here. And oftentimes, some of the tractors that we have, especially at certain times, there is no passing it. You consider about driving under it. I hadn't tried it, but I kind of looked really hard going, I think I can make it. But I didn't do it. I haven't been brave enough yet. But there are times that we get behind something that's going too slow. And all we want to do is push. Now, I'm sure none of you are this person. But if you don't know, there's some people that get behind slow people and they want to push them. Now, they're not physically going to get right up on, like actually push them, but they're going to get right up on them. And can I tell you, it's always when you're behind someone slow, the person behind you a pusher, and you're in the middle. And they are so close that if you turn your head fast enough, you might slap nose to nose. That's how close they are. And you look at your rearview mirror and all you see is teeth. Because you don't see no hood, you don't see nothing. Just, and Lily knows I'll sit there and yell at them. Back up, please. That way if I hit my brake, I don't have to worry about what you're going to do to the back of the car. Oftentimes, we might not do it in our cars, but we try to do it spiritually sometimes. Because we know where God's taking us, and God, if I can just, it's a little bit closer, God. I'm just pushing you a little bit closer. It's not quite close enough. Let me push it a little bit more, and it's not. And what we find is eventually we push ourselves out of the will of God. Because we're trying to rush what God is trying to set in motion. I don't know if you know this, and I know I love it. I know you do know it. I don't know why I say it that way, but just in case you don't. I love looking in the Bible and seeing God's long-term plans coming to fruition. Things that aren't connected by themselves, but connect because of a story. And my favorite one is Jairus and his daughter and the woman with the issue of blood. I love those stories. Because Jairus runs to Jesus and says, my daughter is dead and dying. I need you to come and touch her so she can be healed and so she can gain back to life or be healed. Because she was sick. He didn't know she had died yet. And the girl was just 12 years old. And Jesus says, well, take me to your house. And Jairus, I don't know if he grabs him by the hand. I sure would. I'd have picked him up if it meant we could go faster. But he's sitting there walking to his house. And then a woman with an issue of blood for 12 years sees Jesus walk by her. Which means if this little girl wasn't born 12 years ago, to be sick at that moment, Jesus wouldn't have passed by this woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years. It's because of Jairus' daughter that the woman with the issue of blood had an opportunity to touch the hem of Jesus' garments to find healing. I love that because it shows that God doesn't stay in the moment. He's 10, 15, 12 years in our future putting things together. So when we try to push His plan and push His time, we're walking out of a great and complicated, orchestrated a series of steps that are needed. But our God's a gracious God. Because when we get out of step, He's really good about nudging us back in. And sometimes He can tap us back in Sometimes he needs to pick us up and throw us back in. But he'll put you back in line. It might have increased some time. It might have, and can I tell you, when you push God's time, it ends up slowing everything down anyways. And we know this. I know this, but I still try to do it sometimes myself. But we don't need to chance it. Chance ourselves walking out of the will of God to try to rush his plan from coming to us. Because the reason why God takes his time is because he's using that time to prepare us to be the person we need to be when we get to the spot that he's designated for us to be. I'm not the person I need to be where I'm going to be in 10 years yet. I've got 10 years for God to develop me into the person that I need to be at 46. I'm not there yet. You're not where you need to be the person. You're not the person you need to be now for the person you need to be next year. Because you need the trials and tribulations, you need the test, you need the glory, we need the faith, we need the patience, we need the working and the serving this year to make us to the person that we need to be next year. And when I rush the plan, sometimes it's like we're trying to skip a step. How many of you hated math in school? I've never seen a hand go up so fast. I'm not going to point to who he is. I mean, who they are. Some people hate math. I loved it until they started putting letters in it. I have no idea why English teachers and math teachers said, let's get together and make this monstrosity we call algebra. I hated it. Geometry, loved it. Trigonometry, loved it. Algebra, no. I have students today. We're in algebra. Can you help me? No. I went out with a C, and that's the best I could. I don't even know what grade I was. I was just ready to get out of there. But for a few years, that Spirit of Life, I taught math. And I taught math how I learned it. For those that don't know, I'm dyslexic, which means my brain tends to flip the numbers and letters and wordings and stuff like that around. And it makes it difficult to kind of pay attention and focus. And for, 30-something odd years, I was ADHD, undiagnosed, because dyslexia was just enough. So there were times that I didn't get what teachers said, and I had to teach myself. And I made step-by-step processes to get through things, because that's how my brain worked, is patterns. I looked for patterns. So when I taught math for 5th and 6th graders at Spirit of Life, I said, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to make something up. I don't want you to listen to Billy Bob or Jenny Sue or anything like that. I guarantee if you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you will never get this problem wrong. And I will go, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. And I told them, I said, I want you now to teach me how to do it. And you've got to teach it my way. And they go up, step 1. Step 1, multiply the number. Step 2, add the sum. Step 3, add your zero. Whatever we were working on. And I told them, if they always do it by step and take their time, they'll never get it wrong. And I was proven right. And every time I would see a student wrong, it was either because, one, they made a careless mistake, maybe they multiplied wrong and they added the numbers wrong or whatever. But sometimes the numbers will be way off. I said, what did you do? He says, they'll go, well, I tried to skip a step. You can't skip a step because you're going to mess up the answer. You can't skip a step with God. Because if you try to get to where God needs you to be, before he's developed you to be the person that he needs you to be when you get there, you'll mess up what God has for you. So we can't push the detour. We can't push and chance it, hope to get there sooner. Because what will ultimately happen is we'll walk into a storm that we had no intention of walking into, and being in a place we have no business being. I told you we didn't even get through halfway of that chapter, that first chapter. I'm going to tell you, it wasn't going to happen tonight. But I hope that you got something. Remember, God's in control. Let him pilot your life. All these little stops, learn to find rest. Be content with the detour. Be content with what God has placed in you. Allow him to drive you where you need to go. And be okay with his timetable. Because he knows what he's doing way more than I do. Amen?